Congress has explicitly taken jurisdiction and authority over immigration matters away from the feckless, unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judges and placed it in a separate Article 2 court system, the immigration court system. And yet these judges, these unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judges, keep seizing authority over these cases as if they had such authority. That's why I call them tyrannical. Our good, close friend, Maryland man, spouse abuser, human trafficker, MS-13 terrorist member, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia has just been denied asylum by an immigration court, lining him up for his final trebuchet-powered launch out of our great nation. Immigration judge denies Kilmar Abrego Garcia's bid for asylum, but he has 30 days to appeal. All right. First of all, everything I'm going to explain about Abrego Garcia, this is the only way any of this was ever going to happen and ever going to end, but for the interference of these feckless, Democrat-appointed, unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judges fighting desperately to keep this shitbag in our nation outside of any jurisdiction or authority to do anything of the sort. Anything of the sort. Remember, the federal courts, folks, the federal courts are not courts of limitless jurisdiction, limitless authority. They're not masters over the universe. They're not even the top boss in the Article 3 judicial branch. Three branches of government. Article 1 legislative, Congress and the Senate. Article 2 president. Article 3 judicial. The only court created by Article 3 is the Supreme Court. Every other federal court is literally referred to by the Constitution itself as inferior courts. And the unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial courts are among the least powerful and important. Not that they act like it. They act like they're the rulers of all the things. And they don't have jurisdiction and authority over everything they'd like to have jurisdiction and authority over. Don't ask them, though. They think they have jurisdiction and authority over the entire universe. But in fact, they only have jurisdiction and authority over what Congress allows them to have jurisdiction and authority over. And in particular, Congress routinely strips jurisdiction away from the feckless, Democrat-appointed, unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial courts and says you don't have control over this anymore. The Congress sets up either separate administrative procedures like the Merit Service Protection Board for firings of federal employees, takes that jurisdiction away from the federal courts, or it sets up patent courts or tax courts or court of claims for contract disputes with the government, or, stick with me here, immigration courts for dealing with immigration matters. Congress has explicitly taken jurisdiction and authority over immigration matters away from the feckless, unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judges and placed it in a separate Article 2 court system, the immigration court system. And yet these judges, these unelected, black-robed, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judges, keep seizing authority over these cases as if they had such authority. That's why I call them tyrannical. These supposed to be the branch of government, supposed to be least engaged in making political or policy decisions and choices. Remember, Article 3 is the apolitical branch of government. The political branches of government, the ones that are supposed to be engaged in political and public policy discussion, debate, choices, balancing things out, making difficult decisions, trade-offs. Those are Article 1 and Article 2. Those are the Article 1 legislative branch and the Article 2 executive branch. They are the political branches. Political branches. They make political calls, balls and strikes. And because they have the authority to do that, they are most subject to being held accountable to the political will of the American people by having to repeatedly run for election. Congressmen every 2 years, presidents every 4 years, senators every 6 years. We didn't do that with judges. The Article 3 judges, we just said, well, they serve during good behavior. No time limit. We interpret that as a lifetime appointment, though there's plenty of federal judges not serving during good behavior right now. If you ask me, should be fired, but we treat it as a lifetime appointment. And we give them this lifetime appointment because they're supposed to be settling disputes before them, cases and controversies, but not be engaged in political decision making. If you're hearing that for the first time, you might be astonished because every day we see these federal judges engaged in politics when they ought not be. And that's true of these immigration cases as well, over which they have no authority. Immigration judge denies Armando Abrego Garcia, bid for asylum, but he has 30 days to appeal. Don't worry about that, folks. He's got to appeal to an immigration appeals court, and they don't change anything that the immigration judge said, unless it's grotesquely an error. And this is not even close to grotesquely an error. In fact, this has all been done before. Did you know this has all been done before? That Kilmar, Armando Abrego Garcia, back in 2019, 6 years ago, had the same final order of deportation issued by an immigration judge and affirmed on appeal. Did you know that? 6 years ago. Now, of course, he also faces criminal charges in Tennessee for human trafficking and potential deportation to a third country. Where was it? Was it Sudan? They were going to send him some paradise in Africa. But at least he can take solace in knowing that as far as the Africans are concerned, diversity is their strength. After Trump administration crackdown, I love how they call just normal enforcement of our immigration laws a crackdown. On Wednesday, denied a bid for asylum. A bid from Kilmar, Armando Abrego Garcia, a bid for asylum. First of all, when you enter the U.S., you have 1 year to file an asylum claim. The thinking is, if you're genuinely seeking asylum, you ought to know that within your first year in the U.S. And if you don't, it's too late. By the way, under international law, you're also supposed to seek asylum from the first country you enter after leaving the hellhole you're trying to escape. You don't get to cross 18 different nations and only when you get to the U.S. you seek asylum. That's not how asylum is supposed to work. Of course, that's how the U.S. lets it work, the U.S. under the Democrats, because they're trying to import tens of millions of illegal migrant third world invaders to build a political constituency they no longer have amongst American citizens. The great replacement indeed. But he came from El Salvador. There's a lot of countries between El Salvador and the United States, Mexico notably. He could have sought asylum in Mexico, except you know what Mexico would say, and go after yourself. Go back to El Salvador. Mexico really doesn't like illegal migrants. They really don't like them. The only way they accept them at all is when they know they're just passing through to get to the U.S. Then it's okay. The judge in the Baltimore Immigration Court denied an application to reopen Abrego Garcia's 2019 asylum case. He was denied in 2019. But that's not the final word. Abrego Garcia has 30 days to appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals. I can tell you that Board of Immigration Appeals has a big giant stamp with red ink. It says, denied, denied, denied. That's mostly all the Board of Immigration Appeals does. Denied, denied, denied. They denied him in 2019. They're going to deny him this time too. Especially since Trump's been pretty aggressively clearing out the liberal Deadwood from the immigration courts. The news story continues. The Salvador national has an American wife. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. And children, anchor babies, has lived in Maryland for years. He's lived in Maryland for years. They don't say unlawfully. He's been living here for years, unlawfully. He originally immigrated to the U.S. illegally as a teenager. In 2019, he was arrested by immigration agents. You know why? He was arrested in a house full of other MS-13 terrorists. He requested asylum but was not eligible because he'd been in the country for more than a year, just like I told you. However, the judge ruled that he could not be deported to El Salvador, where he faced a danger from a gang that targeted his family. The story he told was that his mother made such delicious chalupas in El Salvador that she became well known for her chalupas, so well known that a hostile gang came to their house and tried to extort protection money from her, and he got in trouble with that gang, and that's why he had to flee El Salvador and why he can never go back to El Salvador. The chalupa defense. They didn't teach that one to me in law school. The actual reason he was in trouble with another gang in El Salvador, by the way, turns out to be that he was involved in the murder of one of their members. That's why they were pissed. They weren't pissed over the chalupa. So he got what's called an order of withholding. Now, an order from withholding, this is hand in hand with the other thing he got in 2019, which was a final order of deportation. A final order of deportation means you have now received all the due process you're entitled to receive as an illegal migrant, third world invader of our nation. It's over. This is the end of the process. Final order of deportation. The only other step is to appeal it to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and they're going to rubber stamp it. Denied your appeal. So you're going. Final order of deportation. And then we largely leave it up. I know it sounds incredible. We largely leave it up to the integrity of the illegal migrant to deport themselves. So we don't grab them and throw them on a plane. We say, sorry, you have no permission to be in the U.S. Make your arrangements and get out. And then we forget about them. So that's what Abrego Garcia did. He got his final order of deportation in 2019, and then he just, threw it in the trash and had to be arrested again in 2025. But he did say, my mother's chalupa's defense, and please don't send me to El Salvador. So he got what's called an order of withholding. And what an order of withholding says is it's not permission to stay in the U.S. I see a lot of media lying and saying he had permission in 2019 to stay in the U.S. No. He had a final order of deportation, which means you have to go. You can't stay here. But he got an order of withholding from, he says, El Salvador. The actual order of withholding, if you read it, says Guatemala. I don't know if that's a typo or what. It doesn't really matter. But he had an order of withholding. He says to El Salvador, where the U.S. is agreeing, listen, you got to go, but we're not going to force you to go to El Salvador. Deport yourself, but we're not going to force you to go to El Salvador. That's what an order of withholding. You have to go. You can't stay here, but we're not going to make you go to that country you say you have a good reason not to be sent back to. An order of withholding. And then what did he do? Did he self-deport? No, he just stayed in America. And then something happened after Trump was sworn in. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, formally designated MS-13, the Central America feral gang. He designated them a terrorist organization. Well, guess what? Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13. In fact, he had been adjudicated a member of MS-13 by the immigration court in 2019. And that was affirmed by the Board of Immigration Appeals. So he's been a designated MS-13 member since 2019. And of course, he was long before that. And then Marco Rubio designates MS-13 a terrorist organization. Now our good friend Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is a member of a designated terrorist organization. That makes him a terrorist. And guess what terrorists are not entitled to have? An order of withholding. An order of withholding. By the way, even without the MS-13 designation, he still should have been stripped of the order of withholding because he didn't take advantage of it in a timely manner. You don't get to request and receive the generosity of an order of withholding in 2019. Refuse to self-deport as required by law. And then when you get arrested, when you get caught again 6 years later, say, but my order of withholding. Too late. In any case, as a member of a designated terrorist organization, he is ineligible as a matter of law from an order of withholding. So whatever order of withholding he had in 2019, it became invalid as a matter of law when he became designated a terrorist for being a member of MS-13. The media won't tell you that. The media will pretend this order of withholding was still in effect. Back to the story. When he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador in March, this is another lie. This is a lie promulgated by a left-wing lawyer buried like a cancer within the Trump administration who lied to the court, was fired for it. And the court now pretends, and the media pretends, that this lawyer was telling the truth. This lawyer, the judge said, the federal judge, who doesn't have any jurisdiction over immigration, but nevertheless had seized control over this case, said, well, how come he's in El Salvador? What's the deal with that? And the government lawyer, the immigration lawyer for the government, said, yeah, that was a mistake. It was not a mistake. It was not a mistake. It was not an error. It was not in violation of an order of withholding that as a matter of law was no longer in effect. We deliberately sent him to El Salvador, but now everyone pretends he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Not the case, and kept in a notorious prison They're talking about CCOT, the Tropical Prison Resort of CCOT in El Salvador. By the way, I don't believe he was kept in CCOT. I think that's a lie, too. I think he was kept in a much more normal prison. CCOT is for terrorists. So El Salvador itself could have qualified him as a terrorist, but that would have been up to them. What America was using CCOT for is we had made a deal with El Salvador to keep Tren de Aragua terrorists in that facility when we shipped them there, because Tren de Aragua, based out of Venezuela emptied its prisons and dumped all those people into our nation and won't take them back. So America, when we want to deport Tren de Aragua, we have to find some other place to take them, and we made a deal with El Salvador to store those people in the CCOT terrorism prison in El Salvador. But Abrego Garcia is not Tren de Aragua, he's MS-13. So I don't believe he was part of that deal. I don't believe he was ever sent by America to CCOT. Now, when he landed in El Salvador, they could choose to put him in CCOT, they could choose to do anything in their sovereign jurisdiction. He is a citizen of their nation. He is a terrorist. He is a member of MS-13, but that would have been up to them. He became a rallying point for those who opposed President Trump's immigration crackdown. Keep in mind, let's translate this into truth, shall we? This MS-13 terrorist member, human trafficker, spouse abuser, became a rallying point for the progressive fascist left who opposed President Trump's efforts to deport MS-13 terrorist member, human trafficker, spousal abusers from our nation. That's what was really going on. Facing a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, the ruling, again, based on lies and misinformation, based on the lie that it was a mistake to send him to El Salvador, based on the misinformation that he had a valid order of withholding, which he did not. Trump administration returned Abrego Garcia to the U.S. in June, but only to Tennessee to have him prosecuted for his human trafficking in Tennessee. He faces criminal charges there based on a 2020 traffic stop where he was driving a minivan packed full of Central Americans who spoke not a word of English, had no idea, and none of them knew Abrego Garcia's name. Just a bunch of friends out for a ride between Texas and Maryland, a casual day trip in the minivan. This is what he did for a living, was this human trafficking. He'd go down to Texas by the border, collect out a bunch of illegal migrant third world invaders, and transport them in his minivan across the nation to various stops along the way as he returned to his home, the Maryland man. They were also seeking to deport him to a third country, so that's another. Oh, Eswatini. He's going to Eswatini. So they asked him, hey, listen, we're going to deport you again. You say you don't want to go back to El Salvador. Okay, we'll give you an order of withholding for El Salvador. There's other arguments you can be made not to be sent places, like you have a fear of torture. There's a Convention Against Torture treaty that America has signed. So if you convince a judge that you have a danger of torture in a particular country, you can ask not to be sent there and we won't send you there. They asked him, could you please just list us the countries you don't want to go to? And he listed every country in South and Central America. It's like 40 of them. He listed every one. Basically, every Spanish-speaking country in the hemisphere. He said, I don't want to go there. So the State Department got this and said, all right, we won't send you to any of those places. Eswatini is nice this time of year. And we have a deal with Eswatini to take our deportees who will not be accepted by their home nations or refuse to go to their home nations. His attorneys denounced the criminal charges and the deportation, saying it was an attempt to punish him for standing up to the administration. Look who they're defending: an illegal migrant, third world invader, MS-13 terrorist, spouse abuser, human trafficker. That's the guy they want to defend to stand up to the administration. Now, he's going to appeal this denial of asylum. He has no grounds for asylum. It's ridiculous. He would have had to file asylum years ago, before his first arrest in 2019. He came into the country as a teenager. He would have had to file for asylum within a year of coming in as a teenager. So this asylum nonsense is just more legal theater from his lawyers. Maybe they think it's going to open another door for that federal judge again, Judge Zenas. I would say there's a distinct possibility that there's some Zenas envy going on here. I don't know. That would be a haircut I might get myself. Just saying.